Thank you, Mr. Galloway. One final question. Mr. Galloway, how can you blame Israel when Hamas bombs civilian-occupied cities and causes civilian casualties in the name of self-defense?
Well, there are two things that have to be said about that. The first is the grotesquely unbalanced level of casualties on either side. In the last 6 years, fewer than 16, I think 15, it might be 14, Israeli civilians have died at the hands of either Hamas or other resistance organizations fired from the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, more than 5,000 Palestinians have died in that period throughout the occupied territories and by other acts of murder. So the ratio is so unbalanced as to call into question, at the very least, the proportionality of Israeli action in response to Palestinian resistance action. We, for example, in Britain, suffered a 30-year bombing campaign by the Irish Republican Army, which almost killed the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, in her bed, and killed several of her parliamentary colleagues, which killed prominent members of Parliament in the Houses of Parliament itself, which fired a mortar rocket through the window of 10 Downing Street, causing the cabinet to hide under the table, which exploded in shopping centres and railway stations and airports and in other civilian installations all over Britain for 30 years. But we never dreamt of sending the Royal Air Force to systematically destroy every Roman Catholic area in the north of Ireland. And if we had, the United States of America would have had something to say about it. And quite rightly, they would have had something to say about it. But it never occurred to us that such a level of violence could remotely be justified in response to the attacks under which we were suffering. But the second answer to that question is much more important. And I alluded to it several times in my talk, and in the anticipation that the person who asked the question genuinely posed it, I say this. If you wipe someone's country from the map, if you destroy their towns and villages, if you expel hundreds of thousands of their population, scattered to the four winds as refugees and into exile, banning them from ever returning, if you build your towns and cities on the ruins of theirs, if you like the house, you simply take theirs. If you regularly murder their political leaders, if you regularly incarcerate thousands of their people as prisoners, if you torture those prisoners, if you sentence them to 99 years without parole, if you destroy any kind of possibility of non-violent resistance to your occupation, if you break more UN Security Council resolutions than all the other countries in the world put together, if you act as a rogue and terrorist state over decade after decade after decade, the only surprise is that there's not more rockets and more resistance from the people on whom this politics. I'm sorry to tell the questioner this. I really don't say it to hurt their feelings. For there's no purpose in my hurting their feelings. But you have to know this. The Zionist idea and the state of Israel is built upon a gigantic lie. A gigantic lie. And that lie is that Palestine was a land without people. That lie is that there was never anything called the Palestinian people. Someone said it on my TV show the other day, on my radio show, that there was never a country called Palestine. I told them there's a painting in the British Parliament, dated 1189, depicting the King of England, laughably known as Richard the Lionheart, departing on a crusade to Palestine, P-A-L-E-S-T-I-N-E, Palestine in 1189. So the man relented. He couldn't do otherwise. As I passed that painting every day, he relented. He said, okay, there was a country called Palestine, but there was no Palestinian people. I said, what then did we call the people who were living in this country called Palestine? He said, I don't know. But of course, he did know. This gigantic lie, that Palestine was a land without people and that there was no such thing as a Palestinian people, a lie repeated as late as 1968 by no less than the Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir. This gigantic lie is the foundation on which this whole edifice has been built. And because it's not true, and because the Zionists know that it's not true, and because every day you can see the evidence that it's not true, because this hall is filled with the evidence that it's not true, this lie has to be built upon by lie after lie after lie, and when lies won't work, by rocket after missile after gunship after aircraft strike. That's the truth of the matter, and in their heart, every Zionist knows it to be true. That's why I can't understand. I see it in the student newspaper there. Learned professors. I say this, and I'm ready to face it. A man who's intelligent enough to be a professor must be lying when he makes the case that he makes in that newspaper and in other newspapers about Palestine. He must be lying. Because no one educated enough to be a professor does not know that essential truth. I close on this because I spoke about the misery in Gaza. I have to tell you, and I have to tell anybody who's banking on the opposite. This Palestinian identity, for which, God rest his soul, President Arafat gave his life and did more than any other person to revive and keep shining brightly, will never be extinguished. No matter how many bombardments, how many wars, how many Liebermans or Netanyahus come along, no matter how many people are killed, as long as one Palestinian remains alive, the dream of a free Palestine will remain. So thank God for that. Thank you very much indeed.